Greetings, hello, happy Sunday. Hope everyone is well. We're really happy that you are here. We're happy you joining us for this 94th edition of Our Ancestors' Voices, program sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Welcome. Glad you're here to join us today. We are commemorating this Sunday, what we call Cointelpro weekend. And Cointelpro weekend commemorates the assault against our freedom fighters. January 15th, 1929 is the born day of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. January 17th, 1961 is the day of martyrdom, the assassination date for our comrades from the National Congolese Movement in Central Africa, Patrice Lumumba, Maurice Mpolo, and Thomas Okoto. January 17th, 1969 is a day of martyrs for our comrades in the Black Panther Party, Apprentice Bunchy Carter and John Huggins. And we talked today about how the forces of imperialism are responsible for sabotage against everyone that I just mentioned, but how they will never defeat us. And so we hope you're able to have achieved your highest level of mental, physical, and spiritual health today. And we are glad that you're with us. And we are excited to engage in this topic. We give honor and respect to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere who fight for their self-determination, which that means them getting this land base back from Alaska all the way down to Chile at the bottom of South America. All of these lands in the Western Hemisphere belong to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, and they are engaged in an intense struggle to get their land back, and they will be victorious. And we stand 100% in solidarity with them, and whatever they need from us to assist them in this process, we are honored to provide. So we always express that solidarity, and of course we express solidarity with our African ancestors. All of the people that I mentioned are ancestors. They've been taken before us prematurely. Each and every one of the persons I mentioned was assassinated, murdered, and they should serve as our inspiration to continue in the legacy that they provided for us with integrity, courage, strength, and dignity. And so we honor all of our ancestors who have provided us with that mechanism, because those are the things I just mentioned that will permit us to advance and reach a higher level of existence as we move forward. So thank you all for joining us, and we will get started with our introductions. As always, we want to let you know, if you didn't, that Our Ancestors' Voices is sponsored by, again, the All African People's Revolutionary Party, AAPRP. And the AAPRP is a revolutionary, independent, mass Pan-African political party that is based in Africa, the national home of every person of African descent on the planet today. All 2 billion of us scattered and suffering in over 120 countries around the world. Africa is our national home. And as long as Africa is disrespected, we will be disrespected. And so that's why, for us, our objective is Pan-Africanism. Pan is all, Africanism, which is defined as one unified socialist Africa. In other words, we believe that until Africa is free, united, and socialist under one continental government, no African anywhere on earth is safe. No African anywhere on earth is free, and we will never as a people reach our full potential to make the positive contribution that we are here to make to advance the world forward. So we believe Pan-Africanism will do that for Africa and African people everywhere on earth, and we believe it is a significant contribution towards the worldwide struggle for justice by all of humanity. And our work to achieve Pan-Africanism is guided by the Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare by Kwame Nkrumah, the founder of the AAPRP, that you see on the right at the top of the screen. And the logos you see beneath that are representative of all of the Pan-African formations on the ground that we support and we work with, not just support, but we work to unite with, that agree with the objective of one unified socialist Africa. And there are many, many, many more. And we are building this to create this worldwide, for these worldwide forces to fight for revolutionary Pan-Africanism. And our Ancestors' Voices every week is hosted by myself, Ajamu, and Shakura, my biological and ideological daughter. We are both active organizers within the APRP, and that's what I plan to do for whatever time I have left on the planet Earth. And speaking to our work with our All-African Committee for Political Coordination Organizations, the revolutionary Pan-African formations on the ground. Before Shakura gets started, I just want to direct everyone's attention to the top of the screen there. One of our sibling party organizations that's operational is the Zimbabwe Movement for Pan-African Socialists. That's one of our organizations that we are one with, you all. And obviously they're in Zimbabwe and Southern Africa. So we are going to choose various organizations and ask you to support them. You know, people always talk about, well, I want to do something for Africa. Well, here is your concrete opportunity. So you see there the Facebook page for the Zimbabwe Movement for Pan-African Socialists. We ask you to take a moment to go there and to find out what their requests are and to support them. I know from talking to them, because I'm in regular contact with them, that they want to create books. And we talked a lot about how there are no books, especially no revolutionary books in Africa, and that's by design. So if you want to donate money to them, because shipping books is extremely expensive. So go to their Facebook page and find out how to do that. Please do that. It's very important. So we're glad you're here. And to get us started, I'll turn it over to Shakura.
Greetings all. Thank you so much. Yeah, I was going to highlight that as well, Daddy. So again, in case you all are just joining us, we are choosing different sibling organizations to highlight because we are trying to help our sibling organizations raise money so that they can have access to books on the continent of Africa that are speaking truth and increasing their political education instead of the books that missionary groups have brought that are increasing white supremacy and the European agenda. We actually are trying to get our families to have access to books that are talking about some of the struggles that our ancestors have done in different countries on the continent. And so we encourage you to visit the Facebook page of the Zimbabwe Movement so that they can get your support, because they deserve to know who they are, and they definitely deserve to learn about other comrades throughout the continent who have been making a difference for Africa as a whole. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and jump into Cointelpro. We hope you all continue to be well. We do not take your safety, your health, and your wellness for granted. And we hope that not only are you and your family safe, but your loved ones, as well as those that you are caring for and trying to help make the world a better place for, including those who have yet to be born yet. We hope that you all are safe and doing everything you can to make this world a better place for all of us. So a couple of interesting things about Cointelpro, just to kind of give us a walkthrough so we understand the baseline of what we're talking about here. Cointelpro was started in 1917, and that was actually started by the formerly known Department of Justice. And then the same organization, Cointel, was actually responsible for the creation of the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, which occurred later in 1948. Now, one thing you should know is that the main reason we want to tell you and introduce to you what Cointelpro was all about was because this is the cause and the connection and the bridge for how U.S. imperialism began its ravaging rage and its movement across the entire planet Earth to take over different opportunities where it could exploit and oppress other people. Cointelpro expanded imperialist intelligence agencies throughout the entire world. So from the US baseline, it entered every other country on this planet, entered every other city on this planet, and some cities multiple times, some countries multiple times, raising terror, bringing threats, bringing destruction, and most certainly bringing danger to the people on the receiving end. And why was this happening? This was happening because most of the people who were targeted by US imperialism because they were doing what? They were fighting against a system of oppression. And so because of that, they had to go. And so we first need to understand that's what this is all about. That's what imperialism is. And for some of you who have not done any political education, this is probably why you think the US is a great country. This is probably why you think the US is a land of opportunity. And this is also probably why you believe that the US is a land of opportunity, because you've been sold that narrative and that lie for so long, but you haven't picked up a book to read anything else that speaks of other narratives. So you haven't been exposed to anything else, which means the only thing you think you can rely on is the only thing that you've ever been exposed to. Which I don't know about you, but I like to have options when I'm making deductive reasoning choices. I like to have as much information as possible. In public health, we say that we should always give the client as much information as possible. Why? So that they can make the best informed decision about their health once we give them all the information that they need. When we leave information out, they can't truly make the best decision. Well, I would argue it's the same thing for us. You all are going on about how this country is magnificent and this country is great, but yet this country has multiple reasons for why some of our same ancestors that we're honoring today are not only not here, but why some of their family members have been killed as well, why some of their family members have been targeted, why some of our ancestors can't even come back to the US, and why would they want to? But my point is they can't even come back because they have been targeted. They literally have a target on their back, and it's not safe for them to return. And why can't they return? Because they did the right thing and they stood up for justice. That's why they can't return. That's not a good reason to me. That's not a good reason to me. And that's the same reason why a lot of us doing this work, we understand that this work that we're doing is so important. We put our lives on the line because our ancestors have done the same exact thing. And we would be honored to die and to be with them because we would rather stand for something versus fall for nothing. So we want you to understand that Cointelpro was incorporated based on preventative measures that were designed to terminate any activity that was organizing against imperialism. It's very, very important that you understand that. And so when we think about Malcolm X, when we think about the Black Panther members, when we think about different examples that I'm going to show on the next slide, this is why these people had to be stopped. This is why every single one of these people was murdered. And this is why a lot of these murders were lied about and fed different opportunities to make you think that other people pulled the trigger or other people stabbed the person or other people blew up the house or the office, when really it was the US imperialist system. It was Cointelpro, it was the CIA, it was the FBI, it was all of them. We have to understand that. This is the reason that our ancestors, their organizations were infiltrated. This is the same reason they were raped. This is the same reason they were murdered. But yet their stories were being fed to us with lies. And as Zora Neale Hurston said, when you are suffering, if you don't speak up, people will tell people that you enjoyed it. And I know I'm butchering that saying, but that is the saying. So because our ancestors are no longer here to tell their stories, we have to go back and increase our political education. We have to read what they said when they wrote their stories down, because the CIA is not going to give us the adequate truth. They're not going to do that. And if we rely on them to do that, shame on us 1,000 times over. If we've learned nothing in the last 92 weeks, we should at least have an understanding that this system cannot be trusted. And if the system cannot be trusted, why wouldn't you go to the source to try to get a different level of information? What's the worst that can happen? You've already been lied to all your life. The best that can happen is that you actually might be given the truth for once. And for a lot of us, we don't even know how to process that because we are so numb to being lied to. But you don't have to continue being lied to. It's a choice, family. That is a choice that you make. And so when you choose not to pick up books, when you choose not to look at different reading lists that are listed on different websites by colonized organizations that are working for justice, you're making a choice not to be informed. You're making a choice, and we have to take responsibility for that. It's very, very important. And so we think about how Cointelpro, imperialism, and different organizations like the CIA, they pitted members of the Black Panther Party against one another. That was them. They did that. They lied about Marcus Garvey and told the UNIA members that he was embezzling money and doing all these things that he was not doing. And the only reason I know this is because his wife wrote a book and told us what he was doing. And she dictated what he told her to write. So again, it's coming from the person's mouth. I don't know how else to make this clear, you all. This is very, very important. If I had sat there and relied on the CIA to tell me about Marcus Garvey, I would know nothing. I would know negative amount of information than I currently have. And I still need more information. But at least Amy Jocks wrote Garvey and Garveyism. That's a start. That's a start. And at least now I know that there were lies that were fed out about the UNIA. So I have a better understanding of what him and his family were trying to do and what him and his organization were trying to do, because I picked up this book that she so eloquently dictated that he asked her to write on his behalf. It's because of that. This is also the reason that the Ghanaian people were fed lies too when Kwame Nkrumah was running for president, and even after he won the presidency. They were still being lied to because, as I said, U.S. imperialism has no grounds on where it stands. It travels everywhere, like a disease or a virus, if you will. So we have to think about that as it relates to what we know versus what we're trying to understand and grow into knowing for the future. Next slide, please. Okay, so knowing what we know about this conniving terrorist organization, we must understand the connections between U.S. imperialism, and we also have to understand that it's not just the CIA. From the moment that I was in my mother's womb, I remember going to African Liberation Day. Every year, we would not miss it. African Liberation Day is one of the biggest events that the All-African People's Revolutionary Party puts on. And even with the pandemic, we've been having some ALDs that have been in person. So if you have not caught our broadcast about ALD yet, you should go to YouTube and check it out, or just be on the lookout because we'll be internationally broadcasting it this upcoming May, but more about that later. For now, what I need you to understand is that growing up, we would have marches that was a part of the program for ALD. And so we would start at one distinctive part of a city in Sacramento, and then we would march from one intersection in Sacramento to another intersection. And as we're marching, we have these different chants. And I remember one chant we would always say, I still remember it to this day because it was written so effectively, is that the FBI and the CIA ain't nothing but the KKK. I'll say it again. The FBI and the CIA ain't nothing but the KKK. So it's not just the CIA that is killing all these people. The CIA didn't kill Malcolm X by themselves. They had help from their family and brothers and sisters and non-binary folks in the FBI. They had help from the Supreme Court. They had help from the president. They had help from the one percenters. They had help from people that you and I will never, ever see, but they get to decide what I do with my body, and they get to decide that you get to be criminalized because you have dark skin. Those people all were in cahoots with one another. And so we must understand that this is all based on a system that dehumanizes people for a living. That is what this system is known for doing. And if you are contributing to capitalism, then you are a means to an end. As soon as you die, they will quietly remove your behind and keep moving on, because the system must be protected and the private entities must continue making money. Nothing can stop that. Not a human, not a dog, not a cat, not a child. Nothing can stop that. So if you contribute to capitalism, good job, but don't get sick, because they will fire your behind and keep moving. And if you don't contribute to capitalism, you definitely got to go. Because not only are you not contributing, but you're getting in the way, okay? So we have to understand that, family. We must understand that. It's critically important for us to continue doing work with organizations that are working for justice, of course, but we must also be able to have some type of security measure in place, because we must understand that we already know that we can't trust every single thing that comes our way, especially as it relates to new people who are joining our organizations, because we know that in the past, our ancestors' organizations have been infiltrated. We know in the past that informants have been a part of these infiltrated organizations. And so we have to understand the snitches are coming. Informants are coming and cowards are coming. And some of us are sitting right next to them because we're listening to this seminar in our meeting right now for our organization. So we just have to be aware of that. We need to increase our political education. Let's take some notes from Malcolm X, because Malcolm talked about that, knowing the difference between the fox and the wolf. Malcolm talked about that. He gave us the tools that we needed to understand that. Marcus Garvey even talked about that a little bit, and I know Kwame Nkrumah did. So again, making a choice to increase your political education is only going to benefit you and humanity. Why would you not make that a choice? Why would you choose against that? I need somebody to help me understand that. Why would you choose to not be informed? I don't understand that. I need help with that. So we're thinking about how increasing political education is the best tool we can use to fight against the potential threat, being that we know we need to lock in procedures that can be in place to help us with our political education. And as I said, we're using past information to help us create a different future. The more information we have that was done in the past by our family, our comrades, then we can actually apply that to look at how we're going to move forward. What we do currently in the present is going to impact our future. We know that. So we're thinking about how there are numerous examples of how Cointelpro has worked tirelessly to destroy progressive work towards a better world, meaning that that Cointelpro doesn't want to have a reason for oppression to be gone with. It wants to continue oppressing people, and it wants to continue exploiting people. So we have to think about that and think about how you won't believe these examples if you're not politically educated. So these examples you see on the bullets, these might be made up to you. You might think we're lying to you right now. And I guess I could understand that if I didn't have the level of political education that I do. But this also means that you're relying on the same system to feed you more lies, because the system you're relying on is saying the opposite of what this bullet is saying. And I'm challenging you right now to truly, truly think about, do you really think that all of these people, Malcolm X, people in the Black Panther Party, the different situation that was happening with Bunchy and John from the Black Panther Party and other people, do you really, really think that they all just miraculously died of food poisoning? Or they all just miraculously died because their gun accidentally went off? I mean, we have to start to connect the dots. The data is there. The evidence is there, and numbers don't lie. If you have any type of analytical skill, then you know that numbers and data does not lie, especially if we think about the commonality, the common denominator between all these people. Every single one of them was trying to advance the world and make it better for colonized people. And in some cases, like our comrade Marilyn Buck, who is still locked away to this day, some European people were trying to make the world a better place. So we think about all these different people and all the work that they have done to help us. And we have to understand that we, need to increase our political education. If we do not do that, then we're going to expect that the same U.S. imperialist system to be the saving grace for us. And that's just not a realistic expectation at this point, unless you want to end up like some of our ancestors. I'm just being real. Because when I go places and I turn on my Wi-Fi, I can see FBI surveillance on my Wi-Fi. Yeah, real talk. So I know that they're following me. I know that they know who I am. They know where I live. They know I have a dog. I wish them the best because I have what they need. So if I'm supposed to die, as I said, at least I'll die fighting for what I believe is right. And I hope that they bring it, because I sure am going to bring it and protect me and mine. Okay. So we think about all these things and we think about how we all have a responsibility. We all have a responsibility, but you cannot make the world a better place if you do not know what your ancestors have done before you. They have literally led out breadcrumbs on a path. All you have to do is pick up a book and read it. And it helps if you are joining an organization where you can discuss that book with other people who are also increasing their political education. This is why I'm in work study. Because when you are in work study, you can talk about how you process the book versus how other people processed it. You don't want to just read it yourself and then be able to have all the answers, because the movement doesn't start with one person and it doesn't end with one person. We're talking about thousands of people who have come together to make a difference, okay? So we're thinking about that. We're thinking about the timeline. And we're thinking about how we need to look at the data, look at the timeline, and look at the evidence. As I said, U.S. imperialists has been consistent. They have not skipped a beat. So they have been showing us from the moment that they started in the 1917 that they didn't care about colonized people, and they didn't care about European people who were trying to do the right thing for colonized people. So we understand that that's consistent for them. Their MO is to kill, to murder, to rape, to rob, to steal. That's what they do. We're not surprised by that. They have shown us who they are. Just like a human being, you can't change a person. They're going to show you who they are. If you really watch, they will show you who they are. It's the same thing with the US imperialist system. So we're thinking about that, and we're thinking about how if we allow them to, they will continue to dehumanize us. They will continue to rape us. They will continue to murder us unless we get smarter and we get more prepared. And the first weapon that we need is ideological defense, which is increasing our political education. Then joining an organization that is working for justice so that we can come together and figure out, based on what our ancestors have done, how we're going to devise our plan to attack. Alutua continua.
Thank you very much, Shukura. And I know you know this, but our auntie comrade Marilyn Buck made her physical transition in 2010, so she's not still locked up. But I know you know that. I just wanted to clarify that is the reality. She was released on a what they call a compassionate release because she had cancer 3 weeks before she made her physical transition 12 years ago. And also, just to clarify, Shukura talked about how the Department of Justice here in the United States, which later became known as the Federal Bureau of Investigation, was actually a bureau that was started by J. Edgar Hoover. He was like the first director. He was a young man in his early 20s in 1917. And that was kind of like the prototype for imperialist intelligence agencies. But we just want to make sure the message is clear that imperialist intelligence agencies that make up the counterintelligence program apparatus are international. It's not just US imperialism, although US imperialism is the leader of these forces. But the first slide Shukura had, it had arrows to the various logos of the worldwide imperialist forces. So we're talking about the FBI, we're talking about the CIA, we're talking about Israeli Mossad, we're talking about British M16 intelligence, we're talking about all of the sources of imperialism that wage war against the efforts being made by humanity to fight back against injustice. So just understand when we say Cointelpro weekend, that's what we're talking about. And I think the picture on your screen says quite a bit. And it really demonstrates how even a lot of your popular culture people who a lot of us today look at and idolize, a lot of those people are working in the interest of imperialism. And they may even be doing that unwittingly. I don't know. I don't know them, so I don't know what their motivations are, but they definitely, whether they mean to or not, they work in the interest of imperialism. And I think the picture on your screen illustrates that in great detail, because that's a picture of Elijah Muhammad, the longtime leader of the Nation of Islam on the left, El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, Malcolm X on the right. And most of you know that, but most of you probably don't know who that is in the middle. So that's John Ali, who was the national secretary for the Nation of Islam. He was actually recommended for the job, and the national secretary for the Nation of Islam in those days was the main administrator for their organization. He was recommended by that job, ironically, by Malcolm X. And once he got in the position in 1957, he began to use his proximity to Elijah Muhammad to help drive a wedge between the communication between the two of them, Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm X. And we know now, because of the Freedom of Information Act and all of the FBI files, that it is 99.9% likely that John Ali was a paid informant by the FBI. There was a payment distributed by the FBI after Malcolm was assassinated, immediately, the day after he was assassinated. And that money more than likely went to that man in the picture, John Ali, who just made his physical transition a few years ago. But the reason why I say popular culture is a part of this is because that movie that came out 2020 on Netflix entitled Who Killed Malcolm X, they they interviewed John Ali in that documentary, and he's been featured in quite a few of these recent programs that come out. And at no time is he ever seriously questioned about his role supporting imperialism against our movement. He's never really challenged on that. And so that to me is where the collusion comes in, where the people making these productions are really in line with imperialism, because any serious effort to get to the bottom, if you really want to know who killed Malcolm X and you got this clown in your production, somebody needs to be asking them, why the hell did you engage in the actions you engaged in? And they're too numerous to count here. I mean, you have to do your own homework, but I'll tell you this, that when Malcolm's home was bombed on February 14th, 1965, it was this clown that gave the press conference suggesting that Malcolm had firebombed his house himself with his family inside of it. And I can name you 20, 30 other things this idiot did that were in the interest of imperialism. So when we talk about Cointelpro Weekend, that's what we're talking about, you all, is this effort by these folks to sabotage everything we do to move forward. And again, like I said at the beginning, and as Shakur mentioned, we're going to be focusing on our sibling parties. We're trying to move towards more anti-patriarchal language. We historically called our sibling parties brother-sister organizations. So, I'm choosing to use the word sibling parties. So the Zimbabwe Movement for Pan-African Socialists, please go to their Facebook page and figure out how you can support them. We certainly and definitely ask you to please do that. And so let's talk about how these forces of injustice were used and are continually used to unwittingly assist in sabotaging our movements. And our indigenous comrades in the Facebook comments made the comment that US imperialism is more guilty of genocide than anybody. And that's absolutely correct. And it's consistent with what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said when he said the US in 1967, when he said the US is the greatest purveyor of violence on the planet Earth. You won't be hearing that quote this weekend. They won't be playing that soundbite on the radio stations this weekend, but he said that correctly because it's true. And we have to talk about what we mean when we say that. So if we look at our comrades in the National Congolese Movement, who I mentioned in the beginning, January 17th, 1961, today is the commemoration of them being assassinated for doing nothing except fighting for justice and forward progress. So we start with the Congo because it's important to contextualize the history of the Congo. The Congo in the 1884 Berlin Conference, where the European powers came together to carve up Africa for their own control and benefit. In the Berlin Conference, King Leopold, who at that time was the ruler of Belgium in Europe, he was able to negotiate for the Congo to go to him. And when that happened, King Leopold became the ruler of the Congo, which was 76 times larger than the entire country of Belgium. So you can imagine this created a windfall for Belgium imperialism. And if you know the history of King Leopold, from the period of time from the 1880s up through the early 19s, there were a low estimate of 10 million Africans in the Congo who were killed under King Leopold's rule, his brutal rule. We think that any effort to stifle the humanity of people is bad, but we ask you to question why, you all know about the Holocaust in Nazi Germany, but no one can tell us anything about the Holocaust in the Congo, where we lost 10 million of our people from these European brutes. So this happened, and this created, the reason why this all happened is because the Congo is the richest mineral country in Africa, and Africa is the richest mineral land base on the entire planet. So, and the specific region in the Congo, it's called Kinshasa now, but formerly it was called the Katanga region, is where you have the world's largest surprise of columbite tantalite, or coltan, which you all hopefully know by now. That's what you use in devices that give and receive a signal. The world's largest reserves of uranium, which is what you need to make nuclear power, the world's largest reserves for zinc, which is the metal that you have to have that to bend steel. That's how you make automobiles with aerodynamic design. So you can imagine the multinational capitalists, certainly when the National Congolese Movement and Patrice Lumumba on the left came to power, had no intention of letting the National Congolese Movement nationalize those resources and use them for the people of the Congo and for the people of Africa. No intention of that happening. So what they did is they established a campaign of misinformation against the National Congolese Movement. And by misinformation, we mean that they stoked the fears of anti-communism. We talked about last week how serious the ideology of anti-communism has been historically for the last 100 years by imperialism to drive people into a fear-based existence where you don't even know what socialism is, you don't know what communism is, but the minute you hear the words, you've been conditioned to be against them. You couldn't even, if someone put a gun to your head and gave you 60 seconds to give a comprehensive definition of what socialism or communism is, and at the end of that 60 seconds, if you couldn't do it, you'd be shot and killed. You couldn't do it. But still, people still think for some odd reason that they understand what socialism and communism is. And the reason why is because for the last 100 years, people all over the world have been brutally propagandized against socialism and communism. So even though Patrice Lumumba and the National Congolese Movement, they never avowed themselves as socialists. They never did that. But the Western capitalist countries, led by these Cointelpro intelligence agencies that we're talking to you about, knew that they had to convince people that Lumumba was in bed with the Chinese communists, was in bed with the Russian communists, was in bed with the North Koreans, in bed with the Cubans. And so they did that. And they waged this war in an effort to raise dissent against Lumumba's efforts to unite the country and gain control of the resources. And the man to the right of Lumumba there, at that time, his name was Joseph Mobutu. He eventually changed his name to Mobutu Sese Seko. And Mobutu was a CIA man in the Congo. And what the CIA did is they promised, at that time, he was Lumumba's chief military officer. They were friends, they were personal friends. This was in 1960 when Lumumba won and the National Congolese Movement won the national election in the Congo and began to move to take control of the government. And the CIA convinced Mobutu to sabotage Lumumba, and in return, he would receive riches. So the end result is that on January 17th, 1961, Patrice Lumumba, Maurice Mpolo, another high official in the National Congolese Movement, the MNC, and Thomas Akoto, another official in the MNC, they were brutally murdered and their bodies were dissolved in acid to eliminate any evidence of what had happened to them. And all of this was overseen by the man standing next to Lumumba there, Mobutu Sese Seko. And Mobutu went on to become, from 1960 until he was forced to flee the Congo in 1997, the richest man in Africa. And he was a military man. You don't become the richest man in the US by being a military man. So there's no way in hell you're going to become the richest man in Africa by being a military man unless you have a connection to the forces that control the wealth. And that's what they promised Mobutu. And that's why he was able to achieve that. And in the course of this campaign against the National Congolese Movement, the CIA portrayed Lumumba as erratic, as inexperienced, and as being manipulated by, evidently the socialist movement in the world, so that when the effort was made to protect the Katanga region, which today is known as Kinshasa, that was used as a pretext to question Lumumba's mental capacity to lead the country. And that's when he was arrested by forces led by Mobutu and imprisoned. And that led to the three of our comrades, unfortunately, losing their lives. And as I mentioned, the CIA promised Mobutu riches, which they delivered on. And he ruled the Congo with an iron fist for decades. And after that election that elected Patrice Lumumba in 1960, You know, the Congo didn't have another election until 2007. All those years, the country was devastated by chaos, by war, by dysfunction. Schools didn't function. Services didn't function. Nothing functioned. And so if you want to understand why Africa is in the situation it is today, you have to understand this type of political situation, because we can tell you the same story for all of Africa. And that is the reason why Africa is in the situation it's in. And that's why we're Pan-Africanists. And that's why we believe that Africa being free, united, and socialist is the solution to run all these crooks out of Africa and for us to take control of all those resources so that we can use them for our emancipation. And if we want to look at, again, how that same type of sabotage was used against the Black Panther Party, then as Shakur mentioned, the Federal Bureau of Investigation engaged in the same technique it did in the Congo that it did in the Nation of Islam by infiltrating, having people in the organization posing as sincere members of the organization when really their role was to create dissension and sabotage and to wreak havoc so that the organization would be crippled in its ability to engage in positive work to move forward. So the FBI, you know, they're not like us. They do research, they study, they understand history. They don't go on emotion like we do. So what they were able to do is the man on the left, Apprentice Bunchy Carter, was a leader in the Slauson gang in Los Angeles. So if you know anything about, you know, gang history and culture in LA, then you know the Slausons had thousands of members in the 1960s. And they eventually evolved into, you know, some of the sets, Bloods and Crips sets that exist even today. But at that time, Bunchy was the leader of the Slausons. And Eldridge Cleaver, when he was in prison with Bunchy, and he convinced Bunchy to, because they had a relationship after they both got out of prison, to join the Black Panther Party. And Bunchy was instrumental in starting the LA branch of the Black Panther Party. And John Huggins, who was married to Erica Huggins, because we always have to mention her brave and courageous contribution to the Black Panther Party, they were the leadership. All of them were the leadership in the LA Black Panther Party. And the FBI studied this, and they knew that the US organization, which was run by Dr. Maulana Karenga, who is still here among us today, who is the founder of the Kwanzaa holiday. Because if you know anything about the US organization, again, we study this stuff. We don't just go on emotion. So we know that the US organization has a philosophy that our people need a cultural revolution that brings back our understanding of us being African people. And so because of that, Karenga created what he called the concepts of Kawaida. And in Kawaida, he has what he calls the Nguzu Saba. And they're the principles of Kwanzaa. And so in 1966, he created Kwanzaa as a vehicle to bring African cultural awareness to the African masses within all throughout the United States of America. Now, I don't care what your position is on Kwanzaa or Karenga or what you think you know about him or whatever, that's irrelevant to us. But the point is that regardless of what you think, people all over the world today celebrate Kwanzaa. And it has helped bring people who otherwise would have no consciousness about Africa some connection to African values, even if they're manufactured as they are with Kwanzaa. It still has accomplished that. And for Pan-Africanists, that's helpful to us. It helps us, makes our work that much easier. So that's an irrefutable fact. But the FBI studied this situation. And so they knew that the people who were members of the US organization, they found had come from different gang sets that were antagonistic to the Slausons, which was the set that Bunchy Carter was the leader of, that he brought many of them into the Black Panther Party. So they exacerbated those differences. They exacerbated tensions. Even though people were trying to move past that gang lifestyle, we didn't have the level of political education that we really needed in either organization, the Black Panther Party or the US organization. So the FBI knew they could exploit that. And that's what led to the conditions. All the sabotage work they were doing led to the conditions where on January 17th, 1969, in a a meeting on the UCLA campus in Campbell Hall. A shootout erupted, and allegedly, members of the US organization, or what they used to call their security unit, the Simba Wachukas, engaged in a gunfight with members of the Black Panther Party. And when the smoke cleared, Bunchy and John Huggins were dead. And that they were the leadership in the LA Black Panther Party. So it did have a tremendous impact on the LA Black Panther Party's ability to function. And if you know the history, later that year, the LAPD introduced the SWAT team in a shootout where they wanted to kill all of the remaining Black Panther Party members. And I've mentioned before that I was able to learn that I have a sister in Los Angeles, in Compton to this day, that I've met and developed a relationship with. I just learned about her a year ago, and her husband was an original member of the LA Black Panther Party chapter and was in the Black Panther Party office when they had that shootout on December 8th, 1969, where they wanted to kill all of the Black Panther Party members, but they weren't able to do it because the media showed up and they were live broadcasting them, so they couldn't just out and out murder them without questions being raised. But they were able to, by murdering Bunchy and John, and then later framing Geronimo Gijaga, who took over leadership after Bunchy and John were killed, they were able to effectively dismantle the capacity of the LA Black Panther Party branch. And as I mentioned, you know, this conflict between S and the BPP was facilitated by the FBI. They sent letters to Karenga, allegedly from Bunchy Carter, saying, you know, we're going to get this in. We're going to take care of him. We're going to tear him apart. And they sent letters to Bunchy and John, allegedly from Maulana Karenga, doing the same thing. They did everything they could to create sabotage between the two of them, and they were effective at doing that. And we just today, even, we don't, as a people and as a society, people don't have the tools to independently assess what happened here, independent of imperialist propaganda. So we think we do, but we watch a documentary and we think that that's research, when the documentary has been designed to provide us misinformation. And we don't have the analytical skills to effectively, critically assess what we're watching. So we subconsciously think we're learning something, when really all that's happening is we're learning to think the way they want us to think. And what they want us to think is that if you stand up on a sincere basis to struggle against the forces of oppression, then you will be murdered, you will be placed in prison. And so the best thing you can do is give up on that and instead just get a slave somewhere, get whipped on the you-know-what by the slave master every day. But every 2 weeks or every month or whatever it is, you get money and you can buy a house. And so that's your prize for being oppressed and being your dignity being smashed, is that you can buy a house, and you have a house, you can buy an expensive car, you can vacation to Europe, not to Africa, but to Europe. You can do that. You can buy expensive clothes, and you can hold your nose up high like you're better than other people. And that's all that you can get in this system. And that's what they want you to think. And you cannot argue that that's not effective, because you can turn around. You probably got people in your house that behave that way. But if not, you can go outside, and if you stand there 10 minutes, people will pass by you that are representative of everything I just said. So this is their strategy. And the only way we can effectively combat that strategy is we have to have our own strategy. And our own strategy has to be, first, to combat the propaganda, because that's their most effective weapon. They only start killing people and imprisoning people when the propaganda is not working. Like what these courageous Africans were showing you, Lumumba, Mpolo, Koto, Bunchy Carter, John Huggins, Dr. Martin Luther King. They couldn't change the course of direction for them. A lot of you all, it doesn't take much of anything to change your direction. So all they have to do is one little thing, one little threat, one little potential threat, one little thought of a threat, and you, yes, sir, master, I'll do whatever. I don't want no trouble, sir. But for these people, that was not going to be an effective approach. So they had to murder them. So that's their tactics, y'all. We have to understand that's how they go about engaging in their work. And so when we talk about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., January 15th, 1929 was his born day. We talk about how Dr. King was pushed to the left by the radical elements within the civil rights movement. If you know the history, we've done workshops on it. You should go back and check them out if you don't know it. But Dr. Martin Luther King, his philosophy of nonviolence, his philosophy of reform was challenged by the people on the ground in the movement within primarily the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, because they were on the ground in Mississippi and Alabama. They saw the naked terrorism of the US capitalist system against us just for simply standing up and asserting our dignity. And so they knew that no moral force, the tactic that King relied on, was ever going to change this country. The SNCC people knew this. And so because they knew this, they constantly applied pressure on him. And because King was a principled human being, those tactics begin to have an effect. And that is why it was SNCC that pushed King to take a position against the Vietnam War. He didn't do that on his own. It was SNCC that pushed him to do that. It was SNCC that they weren't for peace. They weren't against the war because of peace. They were against the war because they were anti-imperialist. And that's why their campaign was to smash the draft. They weren't just, we want peace, put a flower in the soldier's gun. That wasn't what we were doing. We were trying to combat the imperialist system. And so that's what they pushed King to understand. And because, again, he was principled, he began to understand that. But at the same time, the FBI had informants within every level of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, his organization, the SCLC. And some of them you're probably looking at in that picture right there: Ralph Abernathy, Jesse Jackson. Those people, some of those people, because the Freedom of Information files say that their chief informant in the SCLC was Agent A. So it could have been Agent Abernathy. It could have been Agent Andrew Young. We don't know. You know, of course, all these people are sellouts, and most of them are deceased now anyway, so they're never going to admit that. But somebody close to King was working with the FBI. Somebody set it up, helped set it up so that he was in this position you see in this picture where they were able to work with US military intelligence, because that's who actually pulled the trigger to assassinate Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Yes, that's absolutely correct. And some of you all, well, why are you all against the US military? They supply jobs to our people. You got to be out of your goddamn mind. This is a terrorist organization, the US military. It's a terrorist organization. And the world will be a better place when it no longer exists, because they were the ones who pulled the trigger that murdered Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And all you have to do is do the information is available everywhere. It's all, you can almost pluck it out of the sky to validate what I'm saying. It's all everywhere around in conjunction with the FBI. And they had these clowns as informants working with them to do it. So we have to understand the fact that these things so easily happen because none of these organizations, SCLC, National Congolese Movement, Black Panther Party, none of them put a priority on political education. So it's very easy to derail the people in the organization, get them committed to an agenda other than being committed to the emancipation of the masses of humanity. And a political education program is the only methodology proven to effectively prevent this from happening. So besides constant study, you know, a part of that political education process, as we say all the time, is criticism, self-criticism. It's our best friend in providing honest assessment of how we are developing as revolutionaries, as activists. And we need that, because that process, if we use it correctly and take it seriously, is the best tool available to us to push us to become better human beings, or in our Nkrumah's Tereus ideological framework, as Kwame Nkrumah said it, to become that new African, that revolutionary African personality, that new African with new ideas, people that will never be intimidated because the enemy's going to take an education away from you. You ain't getting no education from them anyway. They're going to take a job from you. A real revolutionary with solid political education would never crumble because the imperialists gonna take a job from you. You were looking for a job when you got that one. You're gonna find another one. I've been fired 4 times from jobs, not for my lack of performance, not for anything like that, but because I refuse to stand for a bunch of nonsense that a lot of us live as our day-to-day policy. So what kind of person are you if you allow, I don't want to lose my job? Well, then you ain't worth a damn then. You know, we may as well, one day our movement will be strong enough so that those of you that say you're down for the struggle, but that's really where you are, I don't want to lose my job, we'll be strong enough to put a tire around your body in black tar and set you on fire. And then at least when you die, you can finally make a contribution to something. And if you think that's rude for me to say that, I think it's triply rude for people to sit here today and act like you don't understand that this kind of cowardly behavior is the reason why we can't get farther along than we do. So if you're looking for an apology like from that, for me, for talking that way, you better not hold your breath because you're going to suffocate. It ain't never coming. We need more of that. We need to raise the bar. That's what needs to happen. And guess what, you all? That is exactly what is going to happen. And I'm not surprising the police on here listening when I say that. Their whole work is designed to anticipate that happen. The only people that are confused about that are us. But we're going to do the work we need to do to turn that situation around and correct that problem. So we want to say to you all that it doesn't matter that they were able to sabotage all of those Africans, because the spirit of Lumumba, of Mpolo, of Nkoto, of Huggins, of Carter, of Dr. Martin Luther King, all of those spirit of those people, I can tell you the spirit of all of them lives through me and it lives through you. But you have to unleash the African in you struggling to be free to feel that spirit. You have to unleash the indigenous warrior in you struggling to be free to feel that spirit. You have to unleash the European that wants justice in the world and wants you to stop lying to yourself that you're an American in you that's struggling to be free. And you have to unleash the Asian, I want justice in this world inside of you that's struggling to be free. And when you unleash those forces, then you will feel these revolutionary ancestors inside of you. And once you feel that, you will know they will never defeat us. They will never defeat us because the man's technology can't compete against the spirit of the people. Huey P. Newton was absolutely correct when he said that. So we invite you, please join us next week, January 23rd. First, I want to remind you, go to the Zimbabwe Movement for Pan-African Socialists for the next several weeks. We're going to be highlighting them, and then we're going to move to one of our other sibling parties and ask you to do the same. Because we are on the ground doing this work, you all. It's not a fantasy. It's not on CBS, but we are on the ground doing this work. We want to ask you to support it. So please do that. Next Sunday, we're going to talk about correct education for our youth, building revolutionary consciousness in our families. Very important episode. We highly encourage you to come out for that Sunday, the 23rd. Go to our Forward Ever shop. I heard that some of their items were sold out. This is wonderful. You should support revolutionary, independent, Pan-African organization. So by going to the Forward Ever shop, the APRP Forward Ever shop, the link is right there. You're doing that. So please continue to do that. Go to aprp-intl.org. Join the All African People's Revolutionary Party, but don't waste our time. We need you to make a commitment to study. That's all we ask you to do at first. You can do more. We got plenty of work, but we ask you to do that first. So please do that, and we would love to have you. You can watch a video. They'll tell you how to join if you go through that process. abetterworld.me houses all of these videos, and there's a lot of information there. The white supremacists are there all the time, so you should be there too. Okay, so go there. Hoodcommunist.org is our organization as well. I'm one of the contributing editors there. We ask you to go there every Thursday. We have new articles. We have some wonderful articles on there about Africans and why we should understand the Ukraine and a number of other outstanding articles this week. So check it out, hoodcommunist.org. We do our bi-monthly Telegram event on Thursday, and that's coming up this week. So we'll have a topic for you. We're going to talk about Ethiopia, what's happening in the Horn of Africa. We did a broadcast here on a couple of weeks ago. So check that out. It's very important. If you, well, what is Telegram? Well, it's an application. So go on your app store and download it. It's free. You can do it. If I can do it, you can do it. There's nobody out there that can't do it if I can do it. And I did it. So you can do it. So go ahead and do that. It takes less than 5 minutes. And support all of our broadcasts. We have a lot of information going out from the APRP. We have the Pontula one you see there. We have the APRP Revolutionary African Women, the Forward Ever broadcast on Spotify. Those are there. Check them out. We have our comrades in New Mexico do their weekly broadcast. They've been doing that as long as we've been doing this. So you should definitely support that. Every Thursday at noon Mountain Time, you should support what they're doing. You missed it last week. Comrade Onyesamu went to Cuba, and you know you don't know nothing about Cuba other than what Sean Hannity told you about Cuba. So you should go back and look at, she just came from Cuba. We've all been there. You ain't been there. You ain't read nothing about it. So why the hell you think you know as much about it as Sean Hannity does, and he doesn't know a damn thing about Cuba. So go back and listen to what the sister comrades said about what's happening in Cuba. That should just be, we shouldn't even have to say that to people. People should just do that. You should want to do that on your own. So please go and do that. Please, James Brown, please, 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 please get politically educated. And please buy my book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. I'm working with people all over the country. And outside of the country. I can't forget that. And I can't even keep up, but the ancestors are pushing me like they're pushing all of us. Just some of us don't know it, so we push back because we don't know what the hell we're doing. But I'm thankful for their push in the back, carrying us forward, and we're gonna win. We thank you all. Have a great rest of your Sunday evening. One unified socialist Africa. We are going to achieve it. We don't care if you believe it or not. It's gonna happen. And we are going to smash patriarchy because it's an evil system. And capitalism, y'all already know, it's got to go. Enjoy your Sunday evening, and we will see you soon.